Laura and Sam and everyone at Photoville. PDN is a magazine for professional photographers, and it's really a source of pride to say we have loved Photoville and been involved in Photoville for a long time, since the beginning, Laura claims. So about PDN's 30, I'm one of the editors of PDN. Our photo editor, Rebecca, is about to wave her. There she is. We're among the editors of PDN that each year choose 30 emerging photographers to profile. After Rebecca gathers about 280 portfolios from photographers who shoot in different genres, who live and work around the world. We choose some photographers based on their versatility, their distinctive personal voice, and it's partly not like the star-making machine that it seems like, although you guys are all stars. It's an education thing. They share their stories, the struggles, how they learned to navigate a competitive business of photography. They come and talk to schools groups, and they talk at Photo Plus at the Javits Center in October, and at events like Photoville. Oh yeah, thanks, a shout out to the folks who make the whole issue and the educational events possible. Thanks, Sony, thanks, Cancer. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves and just briefly explain a little bit about the kind of work they do. We have both PDN's 30 from 2016 and some from this year's crop. You'll hear their stories. I mean, for a brief explanation of the kind of work they do, they're really varied, and everybody has a different path to finding their voice and getting their work out there. So why don't I start with the lady on the end. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Frances Denny.
Yeah, and you do a variety of work, Frances. Could you give that to us in a nutshell?
I do. I'm an artist, and then I also do editorial and commercial photography. So every week is a little different, and it's sort of just a balancing act between those three things.
Next.
I'm Sasha Arutyonova, and that's pretty much the same answer. I do my own art projects and then also editorial and some commercial work.
And where would avid readers of newspapers and magazines possibly have seen your work?
I shoot for the New York Times, Bloomberg Business Week, California Sunday, AFAR, etc.
Nice list. And so you have work from a nice project that you did. It's in the fence. So do you have it? I'm get a little turned around. Is it like it's that? Oh, it's that way. All right, never mind.
It's that way at the entrance, like kind of to the right of the entrance, I think. That was a New York Times assignment where I had 2 days where I was following a New York City Ballet Corps dancer and basically shooting how difficult and insane her days were. And so those were the pictures over there.
Jake, who are you?
My name is Jake Naughton. I do a lot of work around the LGBT community around the world for newspapers and magazines, and then I do a lot of personal work about my own identity as an LGBT person, and increasingly, we don't have any of this work to show, unfortunately, but you can ask me about it later. I'm doing a lot of installation projects. But I have a container here where you can see a little bit about what that looks like, number 25, that you guys should check out.
So glad everyone knows their numbers. And also just to say a little bit about, because I'm going to ask you guys all to talk a little bit about the scary thing of how you got your work out, but some of your work, including the exhibits, has been, you've been able to do the work through grants and sponsorship and stuff?
Yeah, a lot of my work is grant funded through a bunch of different channels. I'll talk about that a little bit, but places like the Pulitzer Center, which sponsored my container also, the Magenta Foundation, a bunch of things like that.
Benedict, who are you?
I'm just a photographer. I'm just a hack. I make mostly commissioned work these days, mainly portraiture. I also do sort of stylized reportage work, but portraiture is my main thing. For magazines like ESPN and Esquire and New York and other places.
I think, I could be wrong, but I think you're the only panelist here who took the kind of traditional apprenticing route of assisting. Who'd you assist?
I assisted Platon, the portrait photographer.
And are you going to tell us a little bit about whether that was a helpful educational experience or you had to reinvent yourself entirely when you threw yourself into a commercial photography career?
Yeah, I will talk about that when my pictures are up. Obviously, it was extremely helpful. I didn't have to reinvent myself. I had to invent myself. I mean, I kept my name pretty much under the radar until I went freelance, I guess.
Ready to go freelance. It's a hard decision. Let's see. This looks like it's... Yep. Here comes Francis. Are you ready to talk?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So what are you showing? So you do such a variety of work. Are you showing us a mix of...
Yeah, so I'm going to start out
Hey,
talking...
you're doing the belly thing. That one's...
Thank you. I'm going to start out talking about my earliest work, and then grad school, and my book, and then my new creative commercial partnership that I have with an art director here in New York. So I guess I would just start out by saying that, well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm so excited to listen to everybody else's spiels. So my academic background really informs a lot of my work today. I went to a liberal arts college, and I wasn't a studio art major in photography. I studied gender and sexuality and literature, art history, and took some photography courses along the way, but it wasn't until after college that I really sort of decided that photography needed to be my occupation. So I spent 5 years here in New York, working for other photographers, assisting, taking classes at the ICP. I started my own arts magazine with a couple of people from ICP, and sort of without realizing it, like establishing a network of other young photographers here in New York that have really sustained me for a long time. About, I would say, 5 years after graduating from undergrad, I sort of decided that I wanted to take time to focus on a project that had sort of been brewing inside me. And I decided to apply to graduate school. I ended up going to RISD, and this is an image from my thesis project, which was just published as a book in 2016. It's called Let Virtue Be Your Guide. And RISD really ended up being like this incredible incubator for my work. I got to leave New York. It was like an opportunity to sort of quiet the din of being here and just focus on my artwork exclusively among a community of sort of like-minded people and teachers who helped sort of foster this space where we could think really critically about our work. So these are also images from Let Virtue Be Your Guide. I just have one quick piece of advice before I move along, though. Just about that time when maybe you're not in school and you're assisting or you're working, you have a day job, you're working in a restaurant maybe, is to try and create that time and space to have room to sort of think about your artwork. And one of my tools, my favorite things at that period of my life was what I call artist self-help books. So many of you maybe have read The Artist's Way by Juliet Cameron. There's also Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, Twyla Tharp's The Creative Habit, and those books can really sort of sustain thinking about your art practice when you spend most of your day not thinking about your art practice. This is an installation shot from my first solo show out of grad school at my gallery, Clamp Art. I met my gallerist at RISD when he was doing studio visits. This is a subsequent series called Pink Crush, which looks at female identity through the lens of pop culture from the 90s and its effect on late 20th century girlhood. It was really at RISD when I sort of figured out what I cared about as an artist. And that's really what my book was about too. It's about my female family members from this sort of New England world and the way that they represent femininity. Here are some installation shots from other shows that I had of Pink Crush.
This is going to sound like a shameless plug for a PDN contest, the juried competition, the curator, but is that a helpful way to get your work out compared to like maybe portfolio reviews or whatever? Do you have any thoughts on which of those was helpful?
I think that open calls are a great way to get your work out there. I think you have to be kind of discriminating about which ones you pay the entry fee to. PDNs are really good, of course, or we wouldn't be sitting here. But yeah, actually there are a number of other ones that I think are great, like The Fence, which is right out there. The Billboard Creative, which I think is my next slide, actually. There, I think, is a picture. Yeah, so this is this really cool open call where they put artists' work up on empty billboards in Los Angeles, and someone had just forwarded me the call for that one. But yes, I think that open calls can be a great way of getting your work out there, but portfolio reviews are also, you know, so great to meet people face to face and to sort of gauge whether or not they are really interested in your work. And if they are, I really recommend, you know, following up and following up again. So this is my current project, which I haven't shown anyone yet, so it's exciting to have this slide here. I've been making portraits of women across the country who identify as witches for the last couple of years. And I was able to start this project with a NYFA grant. So I won that in 2016, and it helped me fund a lot of the travel that I do for that series. And I guess I have another quick piece of advice. When applying for grants, you know, when you're applying to lots of open calls and grants, it's very easy to sort of submit the same statement over and over again if you're doing a lot of them. But I think really reading the fine print of what the foundation's looking for and really tailoring what you have to say to what they're looking for is such an important part of having any success in that, I think. So as I mentioned, I do editorial and commercial assignments as well. And I don't see this work as a means to an end for my artwork. I love doing this work. It keeps me, it keeps my eye sharp. It keeps me really resourceful, and I feel like I learn something on every single shoot still. I don't know if I should admit that, but I do. And yeah, I love also that it gets me out of my studio and gets me collaborating and working with photo editors and clients.
Do you find that pitching yourself to editors who have a specific idea in mind, is it very different from, say, approaching galleries or a book publisher?
No, I mean, I think that photo editors, you know, they're looking for your sensibility as an artist. So I think that it's sort of much the same. I don't feel like you have to, you know, compromise too much, at least in my experience in the most exciting work that I've gotten commercially and editorially. It's because of the artwork that I'm doing. So recently in June, I launched a partnership with a woman that I met at RISD who was there for her MFA in graphic design, and we've been lucky enough to collaborate a number of times since graduating, and we launched this partnership, which is sort of a hybrid offering to commercial clients that sort of, it has, does branding, identity, graphic design, and photography, campaign work, and it's so great to work with someone all the time and have this really close collaborator in Catherine.
Is the idea that you're kind of like, the two of you are like a mini ad agency, sort of?
Not really an ad agency. It's sort of like imagine if it's a, you know, an emerging brand, someone getting started who needs like a logo and like a whole branding identity suite, and also maybe a campaign to sort of launch their first collection. So it's kind of someone who wants like a soup to nuts approach of finding people who can like pull all of that together in a way that feels cohesive.
And so then are you both marketing it together?
Yes. Very much so.
Yeah, well, it's nice to have company for that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Now, is this your last? Nope, here we go.
That's some of our work done together.
Already, these assignments? Congrats.
Sorry?
Congrats, you've just already done these assignments? Because I feel like it's a brand new venture for you.
These are assignments that we've worked on together over the past couple of years, and we're getting assignments as Daphne now. It's interesting, like having photographs that I've taken, say, you know, by Daphne instead of Frances Denny. And there was a moment early on when I was like, I don't know how I feel about that, but actually that's part of being in a partnership, and Catherine is truly 50% of every picture. So,
I think we're going to be hearing a little bit about collaboration as a kind of way of, well, it's just a new way that photographers work. But something else you said reminds me of something. There's Frances's book published by Radius last year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's at the Red Hook Community Bookstore in Container 24, if you're interested in getting the copy.
Look it up on your map. I started to say that something that Frances said about finding a community where, finding a collaborative community and also like a supportive community where you can share ideas. And that's been important to you, right, Sasha?
Yeah. Hi. My website is spelled wrong there, so don't
Oh,
go
no,
don't go
really?
to that website. Hi. Thanks everybody for having me here. I guess, well, collaboration came into my work towards the end of college, and as I left it, I was born in Moscow and I grew up in Florida, and then I came to New York 10 years ago to study photography at NYU. And so while I was at school, it was an insanely valuable experience, mainly because I had so much uninterrupted time to work on personal work for my projects. So that's where I started to work on my family work, which is, this is the first slide of that, which is images from Moscow and from Florida and through travels in Europe with my family, part of which is my mom's side, part of which is my dad's side. My mom's side is wealthier and has been able to travel to the US to see me. My dad's side is still in Moscow. And so I'm kind of, I've been navigating this immigrant life and kind of dual identity in the pictures for a long time. And so when I was in school, I was really focused on that, but I was also meeting a lot of people, meeting a lot of musicians and filmmakers who either became clients or became partners. So towards the end of college, I started what began as a documentary production company called Nomadique, but it now is more of an arts collective that is meant to provide support for artists. And so the initial idea with the collective was that, you know, we were 4 people who had completely different talents. One, I was the photographer, there was a musician and a music producer, a journalist and a filmmaker. And that, knowing these people and working with them to start the collective also helped me figure out other things that I was interested in. So the first 3 years after college, while I was developing the collective, I was also kind of diversifying my skill set and figuring out what I liked. So I worked with a lot of people that I met in college to make music videos, make films, and then with Nomadique, we started also putting on art exhibitions that I would curate. And so we actually have an open call right now, and it's still open, so please submit to it. But yeah, just getting a sense of what is it like to do all of these different things, kind of, I don't know, it was just a really interesting way to spend those few years. As we also run monthly artist workshop dinners, so it also helps me have a feeling of community post-college that I was really needing. And so towards the end of that time, in like 2014, I started to spend more time, 2014, 2015, I started to spend more time with photographers. And that became a really close network of mine and people who really pushed me to start going after editorial meetings and putting together a portfolio, and just people who told me that I was ready. I think prior to that time, I wasn't sure about it. I wasn't sure what the right way to contact people was, and I had so much other stuff going on my plate that even though I was working on my personal work, pursuing editorial just wasn't really on my radar. And so in the beginning of 2015, this is still my personal family work. So in the beginning of 2015, I started to shoot for the New York Times, and that was pretty much all of that year. Was it 2015 or 2016? I don't even remember anymore. For like a full year, that was primarily the work that I was doing. And because of how little they paid at the time, which it's still very little, but at that time it was very, very little, it kind of felt like grad school. Because it felt like I was gaining all of this experience of what is it like to, show up on an assignment with very little notice and, have somewhere between 10 minutes to an hour to shoot it, and turn it around within the next day or two. And so that gave me a lot of confidence in terms of pursuing other assignments for other magazines that I really looked up to. So I would say towards the end of last year, beginning of this year was when that really started to happen, and the PDN thing really gave me a lot of confidence in that too. So yeah.
Wait, I just have to ask, sometimes, like starting out photographing your family or your close network of friends, it's such a common story, you shoot what you know, but like, did you have any trouble making the leap, you know what I mean, to photographing the total stranger who you've met 30 seconds before, or figuring out, just photographing a stranger and getting a stranger to trust you for those portraits?
At the time that I was shooting editorial, it wasn't that much of a jump, just because in college I was already shooting assignment work for my peers, musicians who needed portraits or whomever. When I first started taking pictures in high school, that was something that was totally terrifying for me, and I would only shoot self-portraits because I just couldn't bear to take a picture of anybody else. So I have a trove of really moody self-portraits from when I was 16 or 17. But yeah, as soon as I started to do it, I think I still get nervous every time a little bit, but I just kind of have to trust myself that I've done this many times before, and it's going to work out. And yeah, this is a project that I did on a cross-country train trip that was kind of like an artist residency, and with 40 people. A friend of mine is here from that trip. I don't know what else to tell you about.
What kinds of things did you have in the first portfolio as you moved from like short assignments for the New York Times and you started to like reach out to other magazines? Was it personal work? Was it a little bit of the Times stuff? Did you get to express yourself in stuff for the Times?
Definitely. I mean, the majority of my portfolio was still my personal work because that's the kind of work that I wanted to be getting. And so, a lot of my family work is environmental portraits, and I thought that was definitely applicable to editorial. And the more that I shot for New York Times and got stuff that I felt like was at the same level as the personal work, then I would weave that in there. And so the way that my book is laid out, it's just printed photos in a box, but they're laid out like a book. And so people just, they take each printout and then turn it over as if it were a book. And the way that it's currently structured is that the Russia work is maybe like the first 20 pictures, and then after that it's a mix of other personal and editorial portraits or longer form stories. This is the fence work that's out there. I think one of the most exciting things that happened this year was I got to go back to Moscow to shoot a cover story for Bloomberg Business Week, and that'll be at the end of this slide or series. And so that was just really satisfying because I hadn't been in touch with, I didn't know the editor who assigned it to me prior. Well, I had never come in for a meeting, but I knew that she must have seen the personal work in order to send me there. So that was like a really direct line. And when I was there shooting the project, it was actually one of the most valuable experiences I've had as a photographer.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, is your work out on like social media and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, I definitely use Instagram a lot. It was something that I used daily in my life before I started to shoot more editorial. And now it's been a way for me to share the projects that I'm doing in a more, just in a more efficient way because I'm really slow with updating my website. So that's, if you want to know what's happening with me, like Instagram is really the best way to go.
So Sasha, I thought this was your most satisfying professional experience.
This has happened since then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this was in February of this year for California Sunday. It was a 4-day shoot in LA and San Francisco following this Michelin star chef as he started to change the kind of work that he was doing. And the assignment came completely out of the blue. I met with Jackie Bates, the photo editor, the previous fall, and I had really wanted to work for the magazine. And she called me with this feature, and I had no idea that it would be so big, and I had no idea that it would end up being the cover. So being trusted in that way now for 2 magazines just has been really motivating. Yeah, this is the other one.
Well, those are kind of two where of course your work is lovely, but I feel like the design doesn't get in the way. So it's a really nice presentation of the work too.
Yeah, they were nice to do that. Get out of the way of the pictures.
Not everyone does it.
So these are some shots from Nomadique and from some of the work that we do. So there are some pictures from our workshop dinners where 3 artists either show works in progress and to get feedback, or show completed work just to give it a wider audience. And that has been going on monthly for I think almost 5 years now, which is insane. And then the art exhibitions, which happen once a year, are multimedia and are centered around a particular theme. So the one that we're working on for this year is on the theme of touch. So we accept, it's usually 1 or 2 nights in whatever venue we can find. We've been really lucky in the past with having a really beautiful space in Long Island City. And the reason why working on those shows had been so valuable was that early on, before I started shooting editorial, it helped me build my photo network as a curator. So when there was someone whose work I really liked, I could approach them and say, I love your work, can you please be in my show? As opposed to, I love your work, can I buy you a coffee and tell you how much I love your work? And maybe it's awkward. So that there were a lot of really exciting little victories every time every time someone would agree. Ryan Fluger, who's here, was in one of our shows. It was awesome. Yeah, so I think that kind of helped build the community of people that ended up pushing me into the editorial direction.
I think
that's it.
Yeah. So, Jake, I'm kind of interested because first learning about your work, I thought of you as kind of a documentary photographer. I know that's kind of a broad term, but working on social issues, and you're kind of taking it in an artistic direction and working with Sasha Wolff. So, are you going to show a little bit of your evolution? Is that it?
Yeah, I'll probably talk a little bit more than show because this is some old slides and I've been
Okay.
working on lots of new work that maybe you can ask me about later. I think for me, one of the things that I've had to learn, I'm kind of a slow learner, it feels like sometimes, but that there's no wrong way to do this thing and to be a photographer. And I think for a long time when I first started, thought I wanted to be like sort of a hardcore photojournalist. And I have 2 degrees in journalism, which I don't really recommend to other people, but I mean, unless you want to do that, go for it. But I started out in photography as an intern at the New York Times during grad school, and I was doing lots and lots of daily news assignments for the Metro Desk and others, and it was really exciting and interesting, and it really trained me. I think newspaper work is really fantastic for helping you be able to do anything in a ridiculously short amount of time. But I quickly realized that even though that kind of work is a lot of people's dream, it wasn't really what I thought it was what I had envisioned for myself, but it turns out that's not really how I work and what I find the most rewarding. And I think it's important to sort of do a lot of introspection and to really figure out what it is that satisfies you and you find rewarding, and then however you can put that work together, I think is the best way that you can do it. And so for me, that means I work on projects for a long time, years mostly, and that's expensive and complicated. And so a lot of my reportage work is grant funded. I think you're going to see shortly some pictures from this project I've been working on for a couple of years about LGBT refugees.
Hi, but just because
Sorry.
we're talking about collaboration and teaming up with other people, if you could briefly explain how you and other photographers came to work on Welcome to Dili and who pushed that out.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that's item 3 in my thing,
All
but
right,
it's
well,
okay.
we'll come back to it then. Here we go.
I'll get to that because there's
Okay.
also other things that I'm doing too. But this work, the next few slides are from a long-term ongoing project about the LGBT community in East Africa. I studied abroad in Kenya in college and have been going back to Kenya at least once every year and a half since then, oftentimes more than that. And obviously that's expensive and logistically challenging. And so this work started out as an assignment that I got, and it was a ridiculous 5-day shoot. They flew me out and then flew me back. And a lot of photographers have a story like this, but I felt like there was so much more work to do on the project. It wasn't even a project then, it was a story. And I felt like I'm gay and a lot of my work is about the LGBT community, and I just felt like that this was a story I didn't know about, and it felt important, especially as we were, same-sex marriage had passed in the United States, and there was like a lot of conversations about, well, was it still a bummer to be gay around the world? And in fact, for a lot of people it is. And so I wanted
Bummer
to...
being kind of a
sorry.
subtle explanation of
yeah.
oppression, but okay.
And so I bought a ticket to go back to Kenya and then got an assignment to go back at the same time that I had bought a ticket by happenstance. And so then I was able to just have the client pay for the ticket. I did the assignment and stayed for another 3 weeks and worked on this. And then with that body of work, I then pitched it around and was able to apply for other grants to continue the project. And so I think for me, the lesson there is to, you know, if no one is making the opportunity for you, to then make the opportunity for yourself and kind of make it work in whatever way you're able to. I think hustle is a really important part of being a successful photographer. It's also a really terrible part of being a successful photographer, but you know, so this project would not have come about if I wasn't really creative and able to tack on making this work with other assignments and getting myself there in a variety of different ways. But so this work was funded by the Magenta Foundation's first Emerging Photographer Project grant, and that was really wonderful. And Marianne does a lot of really good work with the Magenta Foundation, that's also, if you guys don't know about it, they have a yearly thing called Flash Forward, which highlights a bunch of photographers. Pulitzer Center gave me a reporting grant. I didn't know this, but we are NYFA fellows in the same year. And that was also a big way to make this work happen. So it's just kind of been an exercise in cobbling together whatever resources I can find. And then I prefer, for my longer term projects, to produce them first and then pitch them once the work is done. Sometimes it's really painful. Like I was in Uganda in February and continuing another chapter of this work, and I pitched it to 14 outlets over the course of 4 months before I found a home for it. But I
So hustle. When you say hustle is important, you also mean persistence is important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've worked on other projects in my earlier days as a photographer, and I would hear like 5 no's and be like, well, this work is never gonna get anywhere. And so, but I believe in the work, and the rejections I got when I got them were kind, for the most part, saying, you know, this is important, but there's a lot of reasons that work doesn't get published. I don't really know what to say, but I don't know how many Kurdistan pictures there are. This is, I think, when I put this other slideshow together, I was hoping that this would turn into another project, and I've been sidetracked. But this is from an assignment that I did in Iraqi Kurdistan last summer, and I think. Let me see what else I had written down here. I think the other thing about just individual work is trusting my process has been a really important part of figuring out what type of work I want to make and how I want to go about making it. And so obviously there's a lot of work that's really fantastic coming out of Iraq and Syria, and I'm not a war photographer. I'm not interested in that kind of story, but I am really interested in the periphery of those kinds of issues and the people who are sort of shoved into the margins. That's why the LGBT story appealed to me. And now I really don't know what this is a totally different body of work, so I'm not sure where the slides are. But anyway, I think that like it relates to what I'm saying, which is that I think it's just really been a lesson in unlearning a lot of the types of pictures that I felt like I was expected to take, and that to then be able to find and trust that the pictures that I'm drawn to are the ones that I can put in my portfolio and will eventually give me the work that I want to get. The other thing I wanted to say that I forgot is that I also shoot a lot of events and a lot of other things that have nothing to do with photojournalism or any of the other projects that I'm interested in, and that gives me a lot of financial space to go pursue things in the time frame that I'm interested in pursuing them. And I don't think people talk about that a lot. There's a lot of different ways to make money as a photographer, and it all kind of is related to finding who and how you want to present yourself and what type of work you want to make, and trusting that the way that you know how to make work is the right way for you.
Let me just ask the panelists, yes or no, do you ever shoot work for money that you would never put on your website or show to clients?
Yes.
Do you prefer, okay, so that answers the question. That's probably the right proportion compared to population of photographers at large.
So this is another project related to sort of knowing your own process. It's about my relationship with my partner, Juan. And I've been shooting it for 5 or 6 years now. And it's never been published anywhere. It's on my website if you want to go find it, but it's not, I've never wanted it to exist as like a 10-picture spread in a magazine, or, I've been sitting on it for a long time to figure out what it was I was trying to say and how I wanted to say it. And it just developed slowly, and I didn't want to push it. I knew that, and I know that when the time comes, the work will be there. And right now I'm working on a book demo actually with Alejandro, who I'll talk about in a second, who's part of this collective I founded called Black Box. But, I think there's a lot of pressure in photography to push out your work quickly, to either make a name for yourself or to show people what you're working on. And there is something to be said for sitting on things for a while until they're the right version of themselves. I think it's really hard to do, and sometimes it's actually not the right thing to do, but sometimes it is, and I think this project is one of those times.
I think this is, yeah. I think we get a couple more pictures of
Yeah.
Your fiance.
Now we just got engaged. But I'll skip ahead to the last point, which is that one thing that has been hugely influential for my own work is surrounding myself with people that push me to be a better, smarter version of myself. And I collaborate all the time with people on projects. And in the spirit of that, I co-founded a collective called Black Box, and we do work as a unit. It's 3 photographers and 1 designer, and our first project was called Welcome to Dili, and it looked at the largest immigration detention center in the United States, back when it was really in the news under President Obama. And we are all the photographers got their start in daily reportage and kind of have evolved a little bit beyond that. And we started Black Box to be a laboratory where we could really be creative and explore and just kind of do whatever we wanted without market pressures and without other people kind of saying, here's what you need to do in this specific circumstance. And so we ended up having a show here at Photoville. 2 years ago, we printed a newsprint zine, and we created sort of a transmedia website looking at that story. And then the next year, we produced a book that was not reportage in any way. We all reacted to a concept, and it was an opportunity to like really dig deeper into alternative ways of making pictures and look at alternative motivations in our own work. And it's just an opportunity really to work together with a bunch of people with no rules about what something should be and to play around. And I've actually just started a second one of those with another friend who's not a journalist at all, and we're working on designing and producing installations of visual media. And so I was in India earlier this year working on a new project, and that was part of this other new venture called Suno Labs, which will launch in the next few months.
Oops, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought there was another picture of, yeah, there we go.
Oh, hi Juan.
And so in other words, you and the collaborators, you like assign yourselves things.
Yeah.
Is that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, we all this new one, we have a commission that was kind of like the generating project, and then we self-assigned other things. Black Box exists right now just as a self-generated story and project. I also, the container I worked with a designer named Kirsten Nash to reimagine the work as an installation. I just think it's when you collaborate with other people who have completely, I mean, Sasha alluded to this also, and actually you too. When you collaborate with other people, what your brain thinks is capable expands really dramatically, and it's, I think, a fun way to think about new ways to present work.
Yeah, I think also what everyone's describing is kind of pushing themselves in different ways. But so Benedict, you're going to talk a little bit about your evolution. I think you're showing some early stuff. This is like a chronology, you said?
Yeah, it's not that much of it is early, but yeah, so I'm just going to talk a bit more generally about my trajectory while the pictures go in the background, although this picture I'll just mention because this is from a personal project I did just before I went freelance. So I did a portfolio of images not unlike this one that I used to show people when I first went freelance to try and get work. And the second picture is from my first the first time I was commissioned to do like a large-scale portfolio. And this picture was one of those pictures that I didn't see it coming, but it just changed things a little bit for me. Like, it won a few awards, thank you. And it just kind of, I don't know, just seemed to get noticed a bit and is still a picture of mine that people refer to. So the rest of it is just kind of vaguely chronological and will hopefully apply somehow to what I'm going to talk about. So I moved to New York from England in 2009, and I knew nothing about photography. I mean, I was quite technically proficient. I used the internet to teach myself how to light and use a camera and all that stuff. But I definitely hadn't figured out what I wanted to do with photography and what I wanted to point the camera at. I ended up interning for Platon, as I mentioned, who some of you will no doubt know. And that turned into a full-time job. So it wasn't just on set with him, it was everything, traveling the world, doing edits, retouching, putting books together, gallery shows, you name it. It was all consuming. I did that for 4.5 years, I think. And then I guess I learned I learned a lot. I mean, I learned everything I know about photography kind of through that experience, not directly through Platon himself, although a lot of it, but just through being in that world. And also he was like kind of at the absolute top of his game, in a way. At that point, he was just signed a contract with the New Yorker and was making these big portfolios about the civil rights movement and the military and all this stuff. So it was fascinating work, as well as getting to go to like LA every now and again, be at like George Clooney's house, which was fun. But it was really a really interesting time to work for him. So anyway, I learned a lot of stuff during that time, but I would say two of the like really standout things for me were, firstly, he had a kind of almost militant insistence upon staying true to exactly what he wanted to do, which is obviously one thing if you're an art photographer, that's another thing if you're making commissioned work. So it was kind of about finding out what your view of the world was or is, and then really honing it, and then figuring out a way to make commissioned work without sacrificing what that vision is. That was kind of absolutely paramount in terms of my education in photography. I have no formal education, so this job was my education. And the other thing was just that the other like really crucial thing I feel like I learned during that time was just being in the editorial photo industry in New York. In New York, I kind of come back to a lot because it's like central to my understanding of how photography works. So this sort of getting to understand how the industry works, I guess it like allowed me to connect dots in a way that I'd never connected before I came to New York. And I guess what I mean by that is, well, when I was in England, I had a few pictures on my wall, like postcards that I'd taken from museums and whatnot. I mean, I paid for them, but they were on the wall, and they were just like little reproductions of portraits. And I remember a couple in particular. I had one of Samuel Beckett by Avedon, and there was a pen portrait of Kate Moss, both black and white. And I remember I had these pictures, and I loved them for innumerable reasons I won't bore you with now, but I didn't understand how they came about or why they existed. And that might sound really stupid, and it kind of was quite, but I think naivety was actually also quite important to how I got started, because if I'd known how much I didn't know, I might not have bothered trying, I think. But anyway, after spending some time in the photography industry through this job, I came to understand that there are photographers, and there are magazines, and there are individuals within the photo departments at those magazines, and there are photo directors at those magazines. And between all of these different elements, there are relationships that build and last a very long time and make both the editors and the magazines and the photographers sort of who they are. And I was fascinated by this, and I think when I first came to New York, I kind of aspired to this model of you shoot advertising work and then you use the money to make your personal work. That was kind of what I aspired to. I didn't know that there was this kind of third way, which was editorial. So I was fascinated by that, and I realized that all the photographers that I really admired had almost all done that kind of work, and to some extent those relationships they had with particularly some of the most visionary kind of photo editors in the business had turned them into the photographers that they were, and it had a huge impact on their work. So that sort of understanding was crucial to me, and that's when I realized, like, okay, this is what I want to do, editorial photography. Like you said earlier, it's not a means to an end for me at all. It's exactly what I want to be doing. And I actually enjoy the trying to balance your personal vision with what the magazine might need. So yeah, when, I guess, armed with all of that, I at some point decided to go freelance. And at that point, my path, in a sense, I don't want to call it luck, it's not luck, but I was in a position whereby I'd spent years working in the photography industry with Platon. So I had, I'd built up relationships with photo editors and whatnot already. Not as a photographer, I didn't show them my work or anything until I was ready to leave. And then I basically just started calling people up and saying, look, I've quit my job and I'm terrified, and can I come and show you some work? And I'll say actually something really quickly about that whole process. For me, that's the only thing I've ever really done to sort of get my work in front of people, is to physically go and see them and put it in front of them. I've yet to send out like a flyer or a promo or anything like that. And that's really important to me. It's such a good opportunity to let people know like who you are beyond what your work is. And also I like showing my work on a page, because ultimately I want to see it on a page, so it makes sense to show it in print. as much as I can. But those meetings, when I first started doing them, felt, you know, terrifying, because I felt like every meeting I had was the be-all and end-all. Like if the meeting went well, great. I would be shooting covers, you know, Rolling Stone within the next couple of weeks. And if it went badly, you know, I was finished as a photographer. So it was terrifying. But I realized, I have gradually realized that actually I've come to kind of enjoy that process. I know hustling is evil, Jake, but like I've come to enjoy the process, because I've realized, actually, coming back to what I said earlier about these long developing conversations between photographers and magazines, editors, whatnot, you know, I can go for a meeting and it will go so brilliantly, and I'll walk outside being like, hell yeah, like I'm going to work for them all the time. And then you hear nothing, you know, I mean, for like a year. And it's odd at first. And then other times, obviously, you'll go and have a meeting that seems not to go super well, and then the next week you are shooting for them. So it's kind of a bit of an unknown. But what I would say is I've actually kind of come to like this process, and it's not the be-all and end-all. Every meeting is not the be-all and end-all, and you'll keep going back and seeing these magazines every 6 months, every year, every 2 years, whatever it is. And at some point, you know, where the magazine is at, where the photo editor's at, where you are at, will kind of converge, and you may or may not work with them, but it's not, you know, I've kind of come to be a bit more relaxed about that process, and to try and enjoy it. So then what happened? So then I went freelance, and it was really frightening, you know, in terms of like, how am I going to support myself and whatnot, but I tried to be pretty militant about what I did. As I mentioned, you know, earlier, I try not to do work for money that I wouldn't do. I've got to be careful what I say in case there's any clients here. I wouldn't do not for money. I do need the money. So I try really hard not to do work that I'm not interested in, although a lot of times the work, whether it's, you know, a portrait for a magazine or something, might seem initially uninteresting, but I always think it's probably my fault. If I'm put in front of someone else with a camera to make a portrait of them and I can't make it interesting, it's probably my fault, not the other person's or the assignment's fault. So I try and be I try and take assignments as much as I can. And anyway, yeah, that was it. And then I went freelance and I started showing my book, and yeah, I mean, it was both a combination of timing and luck and a lot of hard work and slogging away at it and whatnot. And what you're seeing now are pictures. These are coming up to like fairly recently. This is Jessica Williams for New York Magazine.
I want to mention this thing. It's come up about persistence, but that you'll say, hi, it's me again. It's been 6 months. And so you, like, in that 6 months, if you have new work to show, then you feel you have a reason to go back to some photo editor with whom you may have had a chilly meeting.
Yeah, I mean, yes. So it depends in every relationship. Sometimes it's just a matter of you get to know people well enough through working for them that you become friends, and I'll email them and be like, hey, I'd love to come and see you. I've got loads of new stuff you haven't seen. And they'll be like, yeah, sure, that'd be great to see you, and then we'll go and have coffee. And then other times it'll be like, yeah, there's a magazine I really want to shoot for, and it's just not, the spark is not, it's not happening. So then it's more a case of like, personally, I probably wouldn't email and say it's been 6 months, because I'm kind of hoping by then they've forgotten that they've already refused to see me. So I'll email them and just say, you know, I've been working on this project, or I've shot some stuff which I think is particularly relevant to your magazine. I mean, I would say that thing is key. I mean, this is like a cliche, you've probably heard this a million times, but, you know, research who you're showing and what you're going to show them. Like, don't turn up to the magazines and show everyone the same stuff. You've got to, you know, I mean, to the extent that sometimes it helps to know, you know, where did a photo editor you're going to see, where do they grow up? You know, if you've done a project there that they might be interested in, anything, you know, but don't just turn up and be like, this is my work, you know, take it or leave it. You kind of have to be like, here it is, and here why I'm hoping you're going to be excited about it.
Sorry, who's this naked person?
That naked person is Malachi Fekitoa. He's a New Zealand rugby player, and this is shot for ESPN's Body issue, so they have to be naked. This was very recently in Hawaii for this year's Body issue. That's Issa Rae. I guess I'll just tell you who's in the rest of the photographs, because I think I've run out of things to say.
No, I'm also going to, this is a question for the whole panel. I'm just struck, and maybe this is me, but you guys talk about your work in a really thoughtful way, like you really understand yourselves, you understand your work, and you understand the people that you're approaching. Did learning to talk about your work, did that take a while? or are you just all genetically, naturally articulate people?
It's complete chaos. Trying to do that. Even still, talking about my personal work is really difficult, but I feel like every time I do it, I figure it out a little more. But even articulating what kind of magazine would I like to work for and what kind of work would I want to do for them, it's still hard for me. I don't know. But I think you kind of figure it out the more you do it.
For me, I think it starts with writing about my work. I find that to be like the first place I start when I'm trying to work through an idea. And then, you know, in school and critiques, you're sort of made to explain yourself and your decisions and your choices. So that was a harder way of learning how to do it. But still, writing about my work is always the first way I sort of begin to understand what I'm doing.
So similar to that, I think also grant proposals force you to like really put your work into context, both personally, professionally, and maybe historically, depending on what you're applying for. And I think sometimes it's good just to apply for them, to write down your thoughts on something. I've done that before as just like a deadline to organize ideas, and then just doing it a lot.
I guess I also was asking you, Benedict, about saying, here's new work. It means that you have to be not only shooting a lot, but kind of getting it ready to present at all times so that you have a reason to go back to people? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say you have to be shooting a lot all the time anyway, you know, no matter what the reason is, obviously. But it's not really something I think about, because by the time I go to show a body of work to someone, it's probably because it's already in that prepared state, in the sense that, so I'll backtrack a little bit. In the case of a personal project, that's completely true. You have to decide at what point and why you're showing it to a magazine. Are you showing it to a magazine because you want them to back it or sponsor it or to help you finish it, or to send you back there to do more of it, or are you showing it to them because it's done and you want them to publish it? All of those things obviously matter. And in the case of commissioned work, what happens a lot for me is that, you know, I'll go out and shoot. Okay, so this for example is a picture from, this was for ESPN. I went to the Dominican Republic and did a project about young Dominican and Haitian baseball players and the problems they face with not being properly documented, not really having birth certificates and whatnot, and therefore they get offered these enormous Major League Baseball contracts from US teams, and they can't take them because they essentially can't prove they are who they say they are. It's an amazing story, and also kind of aesthetically, for me, amazing. And a project like this, you know, the magazine, I went there for about 5-6 days, and the magazine run maybe 4 pictures. So I take the time to finalize, like, you know, turn it into a whole project. And I approach every, you know, shoot that's beyond one single portrait of someone as like a potential project in unto itself, which this kind of became. Actually, it's funny you said this isn't on my website yet, and I shot it
There's
6-8 months ago.
Previews and
'cause I haven't had
debuts
time.
here today. That's nice. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, that's it really. So I mean, yeah, like why you're showing it to someone, it matters a lot as to what stage it's in and why you're showing it to them, I guess.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what I'm getting at. It's like you're kind of figuring out what your place is in the world. As you're knowing a little bit about your clients, but you know a little bit about yourselves and how you can connect. This is, see? Hashtag your turn. Questions?
I'll just say really quickly, it's funny you should say that, because I remember when I went freelance and I had to have that awkward conversation with the guy that I work for saying I'm going to leave. I started off the conversation by saying, look, you know, I'm nearly 30, which for some reason was some sort of invented like moment of importance. And I sort of said to him, I was like, look, I'm nearly 30. I can't be here working for you when I'm 30. I've got to be out there doing my own thing. And he sort of face palmed. I mean, literally just went, oh God. As if to say, like, have I taught you nothing? And what he meant was, he was like, look, and don't get me wrong, I know this sounds a bit like bro-y, but anyway, he was just like, look, your work has to be show-stopping. Like, he's very militant kind of guy, but he's like, nothing else matters. No one cares how old you are. No one cares who you've shot for before. Nobody cares about any of that stuff. He's like, you want people to turn the pages of your portfolio and go, whoa. And that sounds a bit facile and unhelpful, and I definitely don't feel like I was at that stage then or I am now by any means. But I think just really, really believing in your work and kind of getting to a point where you think it's good enough that it's worth putting in front of photo editors who've seen more work than you'll ever see in your life, probably. At least that's how I feel, is really important.
Although that's funny because it kind of reminded me of some editorial meetings I had when I didn't have a lot of commissions in my book and I was mainly showing personal work, and even though I could feel that people were responding to the personal work, they were still asking me, so was this shot for someone? Was this shot for someone? And it seemed like I did need kind of an air of legitimacy of saying, well, that was shot for, you know, this client, that client, or the next, to really be taken seriously. And so there was like a kind of a few years of discomfort in showing my book when I didn't quite have that yet.
I mean, I think in some sense it's about sort of following your nose and thinking about like what is it that really preoccupies you as an artist and photographer, and like what are you passionate about taking pictures of, and not sort of thinking about like, well, what's the cool thing, what's the important thing to be doing now, but your best pictures are going to be the ones you're most passionate about.
So can I follow up very quickly, Sasha, to what you just said? It's really interesting. So I had the same thing when I went freelance. All my work that I was showing was personal work, and I was embarrassed about that. And then fast forward like 2 years, 3 years, and my book became all commissioned work. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. You know, they asked me who I shot any of this for, and I can tell you kind of thing. And I felt good about that. And I quickly realized that photo editors were much less interested in that second portfolio, because they were like, so what would you shoot it, and how would you shoot it left to your own devices? And I realized that actually photo editors see commissioned work day in, day out, and I realized that what they really want to know is what would you do left to your own devices?
You mean how to be a better editor of your own work? Yeah. Thoughts?
I think getting as many eyes on a project as possible is really important, but there does come a moment sort of towards the end when you sort of feel like you're wrapping things up and you're pretty happy with your edit and your sequencing, that I think you kind of have to realize that everybody's going to tell you something slightly different, and you have to kind of own what you believe is the final edit and sequencing and what you think the book should be. So it is about feedback for a long part of the process, but then you really have to listen to yourself.
Yeah, I think this also goes back to your question too. A big part of doing this is just, it requires a lot of introspection, I think, to know what it is that you feel like you offer as a photographer, or anything really, but because then you can take the 20 people who've given you completely different feedback about your edit and your sequence, and you can say, oh, that was all good, but what I actually know to be true about myself as a photographer and what I'm interested in is this. So it's a little bit of both, I think.
Amy, do I get to take one more question?
One more.
Okay, this is it.
Sorry,
So no pressure, but this has got to be a great question. Yes.
Trying to negotiate for something, but I mean, if it's really something compelling, then I'd take those jobs.
Yeah, I think it's fine to try to get more money, but if it doesn't work out, then you just decide, are you going to make a personal project out of this? Is this going to be something really helpful or interesting to you? Like, you're a photographer, you should love, you know.
Get you access to something that you're really interested in. There's other values that you can be true to besides just needing to. We're in New York. There's rent.
But yeah, I would say know your worth too. And like, I think anytime someone offers you too low of money, it's an opportunity to talk to them about why that's too low and why you think that you bring more to the table and what that means.
Yeah, I agree. I would say generally take it. The way I see it in terms of earning money is, I don't see it so much as job by job as like kind of a month or 3 months. And hopefully every now and again I'll get a job that pays weirdly good amount of money that allows me to offset the ones that pay weirdly bad amounts of money.
I know, but these guys are wise and they take a long view. Now that people brought up money, we have 2 questions. But we did just get the signal from the very important Amy Wolff that we got to get off stage, because there's a super great panel that's coming that I really recommend you stick around for. If you want to know a little bit more about their work, I recommend going to pdns30.com and reading their individual stories, or grabbing an copy of the magazine from the back, or you can stalk them as they go. That happens as they exit out. Oh, and thanks everybody. Thanks for the questions and the panel.